So, from Parasya Jyoti, light of the Supreme, we come to ignorance. Yeah. And ignorance on an uneasy throne, travestied with a fortuitous sovereignty, a figure of knowledge, garbed in dubious words, and tinsel thought form, slightly inadequate. Ignorance on an uneasy throne. This word uneasy is a little puzzling. Can ignorance really have an easy throne? Can ignorance really have an easy throne? Certainly not. Certainly not. So it is a kind of redundancy, you can say. It is a kind of emphasis which brings out a certain shade of the word ignorance on an uneasy throne. You can put it that way, or you can also say that there are different types of thrones. Stable thrones, peacock thrones, king thrones, king thrones like that. Whereas this throne is an uneasy throne, you see. Among those variety of thrones, this is an uneasy throne, you see. A figure of knowledge, garbed in dubious words. Well, ignorance is not totally ignorance, total ignorance. There is a kind of a knowledge hidden behind it. There is a certain element of truth in what it is saying, but that is a limited truth. That is something which also limits knowledge by itself, you see. A figure of knowledge, garbed in dubious words, and tinsel thought forms, brightly inadequate. Well, that is the character of ignorance. A laborer in the dark, dazzled. A laborer in the dark, dazzled by half light. A laborer, this is ignorance, is a laborer in the dark, in the night, in the lower hemisphere, dazzled by half light of mind. Half light of mind. What it knew was an image in a broken glass. So what you see in an image in a broken glass means you will see a number of images, variety of images. Glass is broken, each piece of glass will show its own image, you see. So, in other words, that is the very character of mind. Analysis, breaking up into bits like that, you see. So it is a broken glass in which you see the images of reality, variety of images of reality. What it knew was an image in a broken glass. What it saw was real, but its sight untrue. Its sight untrue. Well, it sees something which is real. There is a reality behind the whole thing, but its sight untrue. What it interprets, what it really sees in that is not really the truth of reality at all. Is not the truth of reality at all. So we have seen last time broken glass vis-a-vis Eliot's broken pieces, broken column. A laborer in the dark, dazzled by half light. What it saw was an image in a broken glass. What it saw was real, but its sight untrue. All the ideas in its vast repertory, in ignorance, in its vast repertory, were like the mutterings of a transient cloud. A cloud comes and goes away, and no trace is left behind afterwards, you see. Same way, our thoughts, our images of reality, you make a kind of a picture, but then it keeps on constantly changing. Tomorrow you have got one picture, day after tomorrow you have another picture. It keeps on changing constantly, you see, all the while, you see. But like mutterings in a transient cloud, that spent itself in sound and left no trace. So the sound is spending itself I'm sorry, that spent itself in sound. It means idea. No, what? Matter is a transient cloud. That cloud is spending itself in sound and leaving behind no trace. A frail house hanging in uncertain air. So it is hanging in the air actually. Castle in wind. It is a kind of a castle in the wind. A frail house hanging in certain air. The thin, ingenious web round which it moves, put out a while on the tree of the universe and gathered up into itself again was only a trap to catch life's insect food. So ultimately, what does it do? This idea, this ignorance, it catches insect food, something here and something there, something there. It is like a hen scratching for grains on a heap of dustbin. You see, dustbin, you see like that, which it mows, put out a while on the tree of the universe and gathered up into itself again, was only a trap to catch life's insect food. Vain thoughts that flutter fragile in brief light. Vain thoughts that flutter fragile in brief light. But that once captured in fixed forms of mind. So once the mind catches it, it becomes dead. It loses its soul, it loses its character, its reality, its vibrancy, its power. Winged on the flutter child in flying, but that once captured in fixed forms of mind, aims puny, but looming large in man's small scale. Really, I mean, our objectives, our aims, our projects are so small, so trivial, they have no real content at all, you see. The kind of questions which we ask, they are in a certain sense meaningless. They are very insignificant kind of questions we are asking all the while, you see. Whether this will happen or that will happen. It's immaterial whether this happens or that happens. That we never understand. Because in the course of things, they are going to be changed also. Aims pure, but looming large in man's small scale. Flickers of imagination's brilliant gaze, and cobweb-wrapped beliefs alive no more. That is what the mind do. That is what ignorance does, you see. And cobweb-wrapped beliefs alive no more. The magic hut of built-up certitudes, made out of glittering dust and bright moonshine. So it's all actually a moonshine. It's not real in a certain sense. Dust and moonshine, in which it shrines its image of the real, shrines the image of the real, but that image is there, but it doesn't have that reality really is, in which it shrines its image the real, collapse into the nations whence it rules. So ultimately, whatever image, whatever picture we have produced of that thing, where does it disappear? Into nations, into nothing. Ultimately it disappears into nothing, you see. That is the character of ignorance, you see. It is doing something, it is having a certain functional role in the course of things, but that is a transitory goal. It is necessary also to have that thing to keep on building on that more and more things. Collapse into the nations whence it rose. So this ignorance, what is the birthplace of this ignorance? Nations. It rose from nations. Ignorance rose from nations. That is the birthplace of ignorance, you see. Only a gleam was there of simple facts that shroud the mystery lurking in their glow. That shroud the mystery lurking in their glow. Glow of facts, simple facts, glow, and falsehoods based on hidden realities by which they live until they fall from time. So they live there for a while and then again they disappear, they go out of existence completely, you see. Our mind is a house haunted by the slain past. The past is not there, the past has been slain, but the ghosts of the past are there around. And it is these ghosts, they are haunting our house. You had thought of something, that thought has completely disappeared from existence, so to say, but this ghost is still lingering around, haunting you all the while, you see. Our mind is a house haunted by the slain past, ideas soon mummified, ghosts of old truths, ghosts of old truths. They are the past, slain past. God's spontaneity is tied with formal string and packed into drawers of reason, trim bureau. So you have got a desk table, and in the drawers you are putting all those ideas and things like that, you see. God's spontaneity is what is spontaneous, what is natural, what is kind of supple and luminous and bright, which can change, adapt itself, and packed into drawers of reason's trim bureau. Drawers of reason trim bureau. Drawers of bureau. Well, that is of course the classical image. You have got a desk table and you have got drawers and you keep all those things here. Nowadays you will not use that image. You will use in the desktop computer all those files and put them there completely, you see. They will be lying there, you see. And packed into drawers of reason trim bureau. A grave of great lost opportunities. Well, that is the slain past. So there were opportunities, but then they are lost now. Or an office for misuse of soul and life. And all the waste man makes of heaven's gifts. And all the waste man makes of heaven's gifts. Well, that is the reality. Heaven is showering gifts on us. But then what do we do with those gifts of her? Heaven is showering beauty, love, joy, sweetness, power, knowledge. He's showering all those things on us. What do you do with them? They become waste. They turn into something ugly. Beauty becomes ugly. Love becomes hatred. So it becomes a waste in that sense, you see. All the ways man's make of heavens given, and all his squanderings of nature's store, a stage for the comedy of ignorance. So this is the ignorance, this is the comedy of ignorance. It has done something good, and it is a comedy, it's not a tragedy, means it is useful in a certain sense, the happy outcome is there, you see. A stage for the comedy of ignorance. The world seemed a long, aeonic period scene. All sterile grew, no base was left secure. All sterile grew, no base was left secure. So you cannot stand on something which is stable, which will hold you on, give you proper support all the while. The world seemed a long, aeonic period. So this has been going on from ages to age, from age after age, it is happening, you see. Aeonic, long periods of time, it has been happening all along. But at the same time, he says, the world seemed a long. The world seemed. It means that it is not really so. It means that it is not really so. It seemed a long, aeonic failure seen. That failure, whatever to call that, incompleteness, that blemish, whatever you call it, is something functional. It has a certain purpose to play in the scheme of things. The world seemed a long, aeonic failure seen. So it's not really something illusory. It is a fact also. It's all sterile grew, no base was left secure. Aside with the edge of convicting pain, the builder, reason, lost her confidence. The reason herself is losing her confidence under the shifting scheme. Reason is feminine, as we have seen already in the previous cantos. The builder, based on ignorance, reason, lost her confidence in the successful sleight and turn of thought that make the soul the prisoner of a phrase. So you get caught in some word, some phrase, some idiom, and then you kind of get stuck, and then you get lost completely in that, you see. His highest wisdom was a brilliant guess. So it's not really a truth, it's still a guess. It is still an imagination. It is still something which may not be really there. His highest wisdom was a brilliant guess. Its mighty structured science, its mighty structured science of the world, a passing light on being's surface. Its highest wisdom was a brilliant guess. Its highest wisdom, soul's highest wisdom, is a brilliant guess here in the hands of reason. In the hands of reason. Its highest wisdom was a brilliant guess. Its mighty structured science of the world, a passing light on being's surfaces. That is what reason has made. What the soul has given you, highest wisdom, structured science, of that, what has that reason done, is what he is saying. There was nothing there but a schema drawn by sense. So our experience, our expression is the sensuous expression of the sense. We are governed by five senses and we depend entirely upon these five senses. There was nothing there but a schema drawn by sense, a substitute for eternal mysteries. Well, the schema is nothing but a substitute for the mysteries. This is what we make mysteries. A scroll figure of reality, a plan and elevation by the architect word. Architect word, it is the word who is erecting this structure, this building, this edifice, imposed upon the semblances of time. Existence itself was shadowed by a doubt. That is a play of reason. That is a play of reason. Existence itself was shadowed by a doubt. Almost it seemed a lotus leaf afloat on a nude pool of cosmic nothingness. On a nude pool of cosmic nothing. Lotus leaf, hydrophobic. This leaf is hydrophobic. It is in water, but the water does not touch it. It's like that, hydrophobic. Existence itself was shadowed by a doubt. Almost it seemed, that existence seemed a lotus leaf afloat on a nude pool of cosmic nothingness. A bare pool of nothingness. On that you see. This great spectator and creator mind, he is talking about the self of mind. So he, the great spectator and creator, was only some half-seeing delegate. After all, what is the self of mind? Only a half-seeing delegate. He is too far away from truth and reality. Not even the overmind is accessible to it, you see. Was only half-seeing delegate. A veil that hung between the soul and light. The soul who is there in ignorance and the light, supreme light. It is between these two that this creator mind, the self of mind, is acting like a veil. Is acting like a veil. This great spectator and creator mind was only some half-seeing delegate, a veil that hung between the soul and light. An idol, not the living body of God. So ultimately what we got is an image. A bronze image or a stone image or whatever it is not a living body of God. Living body of God. Well, it is possible that even the stone goddess can be vibrant with her power, living, dynamic, active, emanating something, as if some kind of prana, life force has entered into the image, and it is that life force in the image which acts and gives you boons. That is also possible, you see. But ultimately, it is a living body of God, not the living body of God. Living body of God does not need an image. It itself is radiating all that thing. A veil that hung between the soul and light. Now, there is a deeper question here. The self of mind is acting as a veil. The self of mind is acting as a veil between light and the soul. Soul in the nature below and light above, and the veil of self of mind is there. The question is it the same veil about which the Upanishad speaks? The Upanishad speaks that the face of the truth is covered by a golden lid. The face of the truth is covered by a golden lid. Ishavasya Upanishad says, face of the truth is covered by a golden lid. Hiranmayana patrena, Hiranmayana, golden patra. Patra means vessel. His face is covered by the golden lid, you see. Now, is this veil that hung between the soul and light the same as the golden lid covering the face of the truth? Not yet. It is not that. It is still down below, you see. It is still down below, you see. The golden lid comes at the overmind. Overmind is a golden lid between the truth consciousness and the lower ignorance. Golden lid. Overmind is. So this veil that hung between the soul and life, and at all, not the living body of God. Even the still spirit that looks upon the works was some pale front of the unknowable. So, to this mind, even the spirit looks a pale front of the unknowable. What you see really is only some kind of a burnout, pale, faded image of the unknowable, you see, unknowable. A shadow, same the wide and witness self. A shadow, same the wide and witness self. So the witness self, Sakshi Purusha. Witness self is Sakshi Purusha. What is Sakshi Purusha? Witness soul. He is only a shadow. He is only a shadow, Sakshi Purusha. His liberation and immobile calm, a void recoil of being from time made thing, not a self-vision of eternity. So it is not the self-vision of eternity at all, what it gives you here. A shadow, same, the wide and witness self. This word shadow is a very typical word in English. Shadow. See, English is an accented language. So you say shadow. You say shadow. The stress falls on the first syllable, shadow. But if you go with a quantity of sound involved, shadow. Do has a larger quantity of sound than sha. Quantity of sound in do is more than in sha. So it depends upon how you want to scan it. If you want to scan it using the quantity of sound, then you will say shadow as an accented word in English. You say shadow in the classical scansion of lines. So the line, in fact, here of course the line will stand as an accented line. A shadow same, I am, divide, I am, and witness, I am, self. So all are I ams here. All are I ams here in this line. Its liberation and immobile calm, a void recoil of being from time and time, not the self-vision of eternity. Deep peace was there. So that is the comedy of ignorance. Yes.
So the witness.
Pardon?
Witness self.
Sakshi Purusha.
Who is it, Sakshi Purusha?
The Spirit Himself.
Spirit himself.
The Spirit Himself in that form. See, behind the working of Prakriti, of nature, both are present. Prakriti, nature will not do anything unless there is sanction coming to her from the Purusha. Unless, yes, go ahead, then only Prakriti will set into motion. That is Anumanta. He gives the sanction. He is the sanctioner of action there. But at the same time, he is quietly witnessing all the things which are going around here, what nature is doing. So he is witnessing them. He is only a witness soul, Sakshi, you see. Purusha. Deep peace was there, but not the nameless foe. That is the great tragedy of the self of mind. That is the great tragedy of the self of mind. It is certainly a comedy of ignorance, but this comedy of ignorance is actually a tragedy. A deep peace was there, but not the nameless foe. Yes, in the self of mind, there is the quiet, there is the quiescence, silent Brahman is there all the while. But the force, the dynamism, the active part, the vibrant Shakti which is there for action, that is absent in the self of mind. That is absent in the self of mind. So this is the turning point in the entire argument which is putting forward. He has described the entire sequence of the self of mind. Yes, well, this is the nature of self of mind. But then ultimately, what is the self of mind? Yes, you can live in a deep peace there. You can live there. But if you want dynamism, if you want activity, if you want action, that you can't do that. In fact, in all these things, what you see, this great spectator and creator mind, even the still spirit that looks upon the works of some pale, what you see here is a rapid change of metaphors. Rapid change of metaphors, completely you see, going from one to the other, same. Configuration of reason, imposition on a configuration of sense. Configuration of reason imposed on a configuration of sense. Sense is conferring something, and reason is trying to understand that what is imposed on that, you see. Configuration of reason, imposition of sense. And it is because of that imposition of the sense, you have the slippery passage of getting into the theory of illusion, Mayavad. Mayavad arises because of that. There is the configuration of reason imposed on a configuration of sense. So you are seeing something, and on that you are imposing. So it is bound to lead to Maya. Mayavad, the same. Now, this sentence, configuration of reason imposed on a configuration of sense, appears in one of the articles published in Mother India, Sri Aurobindo article published in Mother India, March 1987. He uses the phrase, configuration of reason imposed on a configuration of sense. Uses that. This is what we have got here. Spectator and creator mind. Spectator and creator mind. A half-seeing delegate. What he says, half-seeing delegate, you see. Lotus leaf, hydrophobic. Nothing to do with the cosmos. Hydrophobic, nothing to do with the cosmos. It stands away from that. It is there, but it has nothing to do with the cosmos, you see. The possibility of illusion is there in the overmind. It can lead to, because you exclusively concentrate on the silent Brahman aspect only, silent Brahman, then it is bound to lead to illusion. It is bound to lead to illusion. And that is exactly what happened in the history of spirituality. Shankara's Mayavad even to a certain extent, Buddha's nirvana, they have landed themselves by exclusive concentration on the silent aspect of the creator, the passive aspect of the creator. The passive is more predominant there. So if you stick to only the passive, you are bound to live. See what has Shankara done? Shankara has simply seen the world as an illusion, because when you are in that experience of the Supreme Silent Brahman, this whole world here looks to you something trivial, nonsense, ugly, of no value at all, and therefore you call it an illusion, Maya, Mithya, false. Get away from here and go and live in the silent Brahman. Nirvana, same thing in a certain sense, to a certain extent. You blow away everything from here, and you land into a kind of a passivity, of nirvanic passivity. There again, what you see here? Nothing but silence. The active dynamic power is not there in both, neither in Shankara nor in Buddha. Neither in Shankara and Buddha. In one place, Sri Aurobindo says that Shankara and Buddha were the avatars or emanations or vibhutis of Shiva. Buddha was the avatar of Shiva and Shankara was the vibhuti of Shiva. So by exclusive concentration on the passive part of it is bound to lead you to this tragedy of ignorance. Now this is something absolutely Aurobindonian. Deep peace was there, but not in nameless force. Why did they not think of a possibility of some kind of a Shakti present behind all things? Why did they think of a certain possibility? See, here is Yogi Ashwapati. He says, okay, all right, peace. He says, but I am sorry, this does not help me. I am not happy at all. Because Ashwapati is in search of something which ought to change things here. He is in search of something, you see. And therefore his pursuit is to bring down that power, that Shakti, the dynamism, which will change the nature of things. Therefore, nameless force, which cannot be named, Anama Shakti, that is another Anama Shakti. Our sweet and mighty mother was not there. What a tragedy, you see. If the mother is not there, she who gathers all the children to her bosom, she is not there. So what kind of word is this? Ashwapati says, I am sorry, you may be very good, very beautiful, whatnot, but this does not interest me at all. If the mother is not present, then it is of no consequence to me at all. So it is a kind of an extreme element of bhakti which is present in Ashwapati, that element of bhakti, and search for something which will change the course of nature here. It is that element which is driving him, taking him forward, you see. And our sweet and mighty mother was not there. What a poignant line. Our sweet and mighty mother was not there. See. Who gathers to her bosom her children's lives? She gathers her children, gives them consolation, gives them her clasp that takes the world into her arms in the fathomless rapture of the infinite. So if you miss this force, this nameless force, then you cannot enter into fathomless rapture. You cannot enter. You may be very good and live in the world of peace, deep peace, you may be living there, but not that rapture of the infinite. Ananda. Ananda is a creative force by which things move here. It is that is which is required. Who gathers to her bosom her children's lives, her class that take the world into her arms, and the fathomless rapture of the infinite, the bliss that is creation's splendid grace, the bliss that is creation's splendid grace. Bliss is the cause of this creation. By the bliss the world was born, by the bliss the world lives, into the bliss the world returns. Into the bliss. That is the assertion of Taittiriya Upanishad. It is a hymn to bliss. It's a very powerful hymn to bliss. Taittiriya Upanishad, you see. Very powerful hymn. One of the finest utterances in the Upanishadic literature. The bliss that is creation's splendid grace, that laughs in the blaze of the boundless heart of love, of the boundless heart of love. Bliss loves in the heart of love. Bliss loves in the heart of love. What is required? She is not there. So that is the character of her mother. Our mighty mother, it means she is bliss, white passion of God ecstasy, blaze of the boundless heart of love. That is what she is. She is all this, you see. And she is not present there. So naturally the world will appear to you something meaningless, of not consequence at all, a greater spirit than the self of mind. So the conclusion is, sorry, my aim is that, and therefore this self of mind I must pass through. I must go beyond the self of mind and see something where she is present. The mighty mother is present. And he meets her in the second canto of book 3, the adoration of the Divine Mother. He meets her in the adoration of the Divine Mother. He meets her, see. A greater spirit than the self of mind must answer to the questioning of his soul. What is the questioning of his soul? It is that which is driving him. That questioning never arose in the mind of Shankara. That questioning never arose in the mind of Buddha, because their objective was to establish a certain aspect of truth, the extreme aspect of truth. Though it may lead to Mayamad, but it is a kind of a necessity in the spiritual pursuit of things. You are ultimately condemning the whole world as false and mithya and illusion, but then perhaps it is necessary that way you will go behind it and try to find out the truth of this world. Truth of this world. So that questioning never arose in the mind of Buddha, in the mind of Shankara. Perhaps it was not meant to be so. Buddha came for a certain purpose, Shankara came for a certain purpose, and he would not exceed his brief. He would not exceed his brief. You have got a certain job to do your job and go away, quit. For here was no firm clue and no sure road. High climbing pathways closed in the unknown, because that mighty force is not there. So the path is closed. An artist's sight constructed the beyond. A contrary patterns and conflicting hues. A part experience fragmented the whole. You see, that is the purpose. Why it is allowed? Why this illusion is also allowed? Because ultimately part experience fragmented the whole. Fragmentation of the whole is a necessity for creating the individualities. Fragmentation is a necessity for creating the individuality. Therefore, that experience is allowed to happen, you see. He looked above, but all was blank and still. A sapphire firmament of abstract thought escaped into a formless vacancy. So ultimately what happens? You look above, it's only heaven, but there is no power there, no mighty mother is there. So it looks a formless vacancy. Her absence is a formless vacancy. You see. He looked below. He is looking above in the sky, in the heaven. He is looking down below in his creation. But all are dark and mute. Because that force is not there. That is the important thing. Nameless force, but not the nameless force. It is that nameless force which will give meaning to the above and to the below. To the above and to the below. It is that nameless force which will give the meaning and the contents. The dynamism is with her. He looked below, but all was dark and mute. A noise was heard between of thought and prayer. Because he is seeing the Divine Mother there. So there is a kind of a thought, and he is offering a prayer to her. He is offering a prayer to her. Please come down, please solve this creation problem. A noise was heard of the prayer, of utterance, of speaking. A strife, a labor without end or pause. This is what we have got here. Noise, strife, labor without pause. A vain and ignorant seeking raise its voice, but at the same time there is a prayer in his soul, in his heart, a rumor and a movement and a call. So there is a call. So this yogi is very definite in his objective. A call, he listens to the call of the nameless force and he attends to that nameless force call. A rumor and a movement and a call, a foaming man, a cry, innumerable, roll ever upon the ocean surge of life. What a line! Roll over upon the ocean surge of life. Roll ever, Spandi, upon Anapis. The I am, surge, I am, of life, and I am. Roll ever upon the ocean surge of life along the coast of mortal ignorance. On its unstable and enormous breast, it's of that mortal ignorance, on its unstable and enormous breast. Beings and forces form ideas like waves jostle for figures and supremacy. So there is a kind of a ideas are there, multiplicity of ideas are there, thoughts are there, because each one has to express himself completely. So that is allowed to happen. Beings and forces, all kinds of beings are there. They have to come into existence for the sake of multiplicity of existence. Forms, ideas, like wave. Now that image is a mixed image. Ocean, wave, jostle, rose again in time, and the bottom of the sleepless stir, in nothingness parent of the struggling world. So, who is the parent of the struggling world? Nothingness. The parent of this world is nothingness. And nothingness, parent of the struggling world. A huge created death. Ultimately, it leads to death. He, the creator, a mystic void, forever sustaining the irrational cry. So, nothingness, death, void, they are the agents of this lower creation. And ever excluding the supernal world. So they will exclude the supernal world. The power of divine expression, that is the supernal world. Power of divine expression or divine manifestation, Brahma, world, motionless, refusing question and response, repose beneath the voices and a mind, the den inconscient, dumb incertitude. Two firmaments of darkness and light, two firmaments of darkness and of light. That is the Vedic description, two firmaments, upper and lower, Vedic description. Rigveda speaks of that thing, two firmaments, the upper sky and the lower sky, so to say. two firmaments of darkness and light, oppose their limits to the Spirit's walk. It moved veiled in from self's infinity. It veiled in purposely in a world of beings and momentary events, where all must die to live and live to die. All must die to live and live to die. That is the nature of life here, you see. It is by that process perhaps we grow. By that process we go. Must die to live. You take another birth, you make a progress, you make advance, you continuously go from one stage to the other stage and live to die. You prepare something, you have prepared something in your present life, now you are ready to take another birth. You are now ready to take another birth so that the progress goes on, you see. Live, die to live and live to die. That reminds me of the mother's small notice in the dining room. In the dining room there is a small notice. She says, eat to live. Do not live to eat. Do not live to eat, you see. Eat to live. Okay, but do not live to eat. Immortal by renewed mortality. So he has summarized now the whole thing. You see, live to die and die to live. Immortal by renewed mortality. That is how you constantly make progress. You see, it wandered the spiral of its acts, or ran around the cycles of thought. Yet was no more than its original self. Well, the self of mind remains the self of mind ultimately in self. And knew no more than when it first began. How it started, it is of no knowledge. To be was a prison. Extinction, the escape. You have called this world mithya, false. So escape, extinction is the only way out from here, you see. So this is what happens in the case of the self of mind. If you remain stuck with the self of mind, then you completely lose the possibility of the nameless force working in you and bringing out greater change.
When it first began, it
Huh?
means when it first began, it's the spirit.
To be was a prison,
No, before. When it
and knew no more than when it first began.
Who it?
You don't know how it began, how it started.
No, it. Creation. No, it. Who it?
Immortal by renewed mortality, it wandered. Mortality.
No.
First line.
More than it's
Immortal
what
by renewed mortality, it wandered. What it? Mortality. In the spiral, or ran
immortality.
on cycles of thought. Yet was no more than its original self.
Who it? The spirit?
It stands for mortality.
For mortality. It is the mortality.
Yes. And knew no more than when it first began. How mortality began, of that it has no knowledge. So there you are. We now we'll quickly get to the statistics of this next canto and then proceed further. So there you are. We now we'll quickly get to the statistics of this next canto and then proceed further. I have made a summary of certain things. Canto 40, the world soul. We'll quickly see that thing and then proceed. The world soul is one of the most beautiful cantos in Savitri. Very sweet canto also. After the self of mind, you are really entering into the world of joy and bliss and lyricism and happiness in this world soul. This canto has 3 sections, 75, 76, 77. The total number of sentences in this canto, 58. Total number of lines is 258. So that way, it's a relatively small canto. Relatively small. It is almost like a section, you see. In other places, we have seen longer sections than that, you see. 258. Number of words, 1924. The total number of words, 1924 in this section, you see. Section 75 has 22 sentences, exactly 100 lines, and 742 words. So again, a small section, little small section, just 22 sentences, 100 lines. You see statistics anywhere in Savitri. What you notice is every sentence has roughly 4 lines. There are 4 lines per sentence almost throughout. Here also you see the same thing here. You have got 22 sentences and 100 lines. You see, roughly same thing. 4 points something. That continues throughout Savitri. So it is a kind of structure. It goes up and down and all that thing. But finally, it falls into stanzaic pattern. 4 sentences, 4 lines per sentence. The canto opens with a covert answer to his seeking came. A covert answer. He is not getting the direct answer yet. Covert answer to his seeking came. Seeking. So he is a seeker. He is a quester. He is charged to find out the cause of this world's failure and see if it can be set right. Can this do? Can this self of mind do it? No. Can this do? No. So like that he is now. So it is a very scientific way of finding out what exactly you want to achieve. You have specified a test for yourself, an objective for that. And if you tally all your experiences, all your realizations with respect to that experience, then you are scientific. You are able to proceed further. So here he says, look, unnameless force is not there. So what? I am not interested in that kind of a world. It has its own value, its own place, but that doesn't really interest me much, you see. A self of mind, our mighty mother is not there. Mighty mother who gathers her children to her bosom, she is not there, see. Then what's the use of that, you see? A greater spirit, therefore, a greater spirit must answer Ashwapati's questioning. He looks above, all is blank and still. If you look only above heaven, it does not really give any help, because the contact with the Divine Mother is not there. The nameless force is not there. If you look above, he looks below, all is dark and mute. That would make this creation pointless. What is this creation then? It's a pointless creation of no value, with no issue, with no objective, no content in it also. If you look above, all is blank and still. He looks below, all is dark and mute. Was all this therefore for such a purpose, such a futility? It is futility finally. All this entire structure, creation, is for that kind of futility. Has it got an issue? Has it got something to offer to you? It's a futility, you see, in that sense. But now, in the world soul, there is the answer. He is entering the world soul. There is the answer. World soul beyond the self of mind. So how systematically he has developed the entire sequence, the self of mind. Here is the meaning, here are the contexts that should give a glowing sense to this enterprise. Glowing sense. There is an enterprise here, it must have some sense, some content, some luminosity, some brightness, some value. The soul of the world. What is this world soul? The world soul. Here is the soul of the universe. Here is the soul of the earth. Here are the soul states. Soul of the universe, soul of the earth, soul states. They are all present here. In the Western description, world soul I would equate to Gnostic Sophia. Gnostic Sophia, the Greek goddess of wisdom, Gnostic Sophia, goddess of wisdom. It is she who is present in the world soul. World soul. The world soul is also in the Christian description apocalyptic virgin. Apocalyptic virgin. World soul, apocalyptic virgin. Rising up. Apocalyptic virgin. World soul in the Christian description. Apocalyptic virgin. Virgin. Maria. Virgin. Virgin Maria. She is called the virgin. She is always the virgin. She is always the virgin. Apocalyptic virgin. Or in the Greek word Theotokos, the mother of gods. God, Theotokos, mother of God. She is the divine feminine. She is the divine feminine. In the Ramayana, there is a very beautiful description of a goddess whom Hanuman meets. He is on the task of locating the whereabouts of Sita. Sita is in the forest in Lanka, and then they have spotted her there, and now he has to go there to meet her and tell her the message, yes, Rama is on the way to rescue you. Now, his passage from this part of the land to the other part of the land, Lanka, that is the small island, and the main land is here. So he has to cross over from this place to that place. It is at that place a goddess comes and helps him. Swayam Prabha. Her name is Swayam Prabha. Swayam, self. Prabha, light. Self-luminous. Who is luminous by herself. Who has all the wisdom with her. That's Swayam Prabha. She tells him, go like this, go like this, you see. So it is Swayam Prabha who is really guiding Hanumana to the place where he has to go, you see. So this divine feminine is active at a certain level when you have grown up in your consciousness, in your soul. When you have grown up, then she really comes and helps you. She comes and helps you. Hanuman was a complete devotee. He had complete surrender to the Lord, the Creator. And she is there now to guide him. Go like this, go like this. To the tunnel he has to pass through and meet that place. And she is guiding him to the tunnel. Swayam Prabha of the Ramayana. There is a little passage from the mother, but I think we'll read that thing next time. Okay, this is a small passage. Let me read it out. It is appearing in Mother's collected work, volume 11. volume 11, page 123, collected verse of the mother. The conversation is dated 28 August 1968. 28 August 1968, and basically it is the context of Pavitra. Pavitra. It is basically in the context of Pavitra. And she is giving you certain details which are absolutely marvelous. You see. There were only these perceptions. She is talking of what she is seeing, the vision, in the experience there. There were only these perceptions, towns, buildings, temples. Huge big temples, towns, buildings. The body without the mind, without the vital. She has sent away her vital. She has sent away her mind. So she is now without mind. She is now without vital. So what is there now is the pure response of mind to things which are happening. Sorry, pure response of the body, of the physical. Pure response of the physical. So she says, the body without mind, without the vital, lived in soul states. The body is living in soul states, he says. The body is, physical body is living, see, mentally, physically you can, but the physical body living the soul state is a tremendous new experience altogether. Lived in soul states. And then she says, there were the soul states of others. The soul states of the earth. The soul states that were translated by images. She gets kind of images of that, translated. It was interesting. I cannot say it was not interesting. Mother is quite, I cannot say that it was not interesting. It was interesting. But there was no contact with the material life. She is in the soul state, but on the physical plane, that contact is still not there in her case. No contact with the material life, very little. I could hardly eat. The physical contact is not there. She says, I cannot even eat, I cannot digest also. She had a difficulty of taking food at one time, you see. I could hardly eat, hardly walk. In short, it was something with which one had to busy oneself. Why that contact is not there? Why one has to work out something to be busy with it, you see. With Pavitra, she is narrating to Pavitra, with Pavitra. A couple of days before that was his birthday, Pavitra's birthday. He had gone there and he had made certain notings of what she had told him, you see. With Pavitra, there the body began to be interested. The physical body, when she sees Pavitra, the body got interested because of his presence of Pavitra, because he was a scientist. He was a scientist. So the body got interested in him, with which one had to be, the body began to be interested in all that, to put questions spontaneously. It is the body which is asking questions. It did not know why it is like that. Why? The body did not know yet why. It asked and asked. The body is asking and asking. Well, it is in that way that one is made. That is how it is made. It is in that way that one is made. That soul state, physical body, in living in the soul state there. So it began to amuse itself. That body which is there in the soul state, that body itself is now enjoying, is getting amused by all these experiences. It began to amuse itself. But this perception of soul states, she's talking again of soul states, what we are saying. Soul states, there were things, marvels, there were marvels. There were moments absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Maybe you can see in the original 28th August 1968 agenda. So, that is what the mother has spoken of the soul state, you see. There cannot be more vivid description than that, you see.